Sometimes people will start with the treats and then they kind of wean off the treats and then they just start using praise. But if your pet has shown that they're going to fall back on old habits, then you need to go right back to where you were last successful, which may have been with your treats. Welcome to episode 5 of the Pawdoption Guide podcast. I'm your host, Bethany Muir, and this is your one-stop shop for knowledge and advice you need to adopt and integrate the rescue dog of your dreams. I'm not going to lie, it has been a rough last 2 days. So I'm going to see if I can't turn my mood around by talking a bit about dog adoption, because if that won't do it, I don't know what will. It's not been fun, but I want to have some fun with you. So today, let's just get right into some really good information about integrating your rescue dog and what to do when they've hit a plateau and you're not seeing the training progress or the improvements that you want to see in your dog. So what do I mean when we're saying that your dog has hit a plateau? Well, it's kind of like if you're working towards some fitness goals and say you want to shed some pounds or tone up your arms or your abs, and you're actively working out on a regular basis and you start to see some improvement. You're seeing some definition and you're seeing the pounds fall off or the inches decrease. So you're getting that great feedback that what you're doing is right. Well, at some point, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, people often hit a plateau. And they see that they're no longer making the same progress or seeing the same results, and they start to get demotivated by it because, they've been working really hard to get up early and get that workout in, and all of a sudden when you don't see any results from that hard work anymore, you go, well, what's the point? And this can really be a great metaphor for what we see in dogs after you've brought them home from rescuing them. And, you've been working on a lot of things, especially at the start when there's like a routine to make for them and just some simple obedience training to do or, ensuring that their house training is going well. All those things can kind of progress nice and quickly with the average rescue dog. And so you like to see those improvements and you think, great, we're really doing well here. And then you get some of their quirks you're starting to see aren't quite going away. So whether that's, any issues with house training, they're, having accidents in the house or marking, or you're having issues with leash walking and they're still so distracted and you're not really getting the attention you want from your dog. Any of these things can be frustrating, and this is a really crucial time for a dog adopter and their bond with their dog, because you really had this idea about what your rescue dog was going to be like. And when you start to see that they have some frustrating behaviors, your bond starts to crumble a little. And this is such an important part because we don't want you to think, oh, well, I got to return this dog. This can't be my forever dog because my forever dog doesn't bark. Well, there's more to it than that, and we just have to have some persistence here. So I want you to know that your dog has such limitless potential. You can make such great progress, and your dog is capable of so much. It's really just about finding what clicks for your dog and owning in on that and that perseverance and finding a way to adjust your approach so you can start making bigger gains in your dog training, okay? There's always another way. Almost always, except for those really rare circumstances. And so I want you to keep at it, and I don't want you to get demotivated when you're no longer making the progress you want to. There was certainly a time with my dog, Rory, that my partner and I were just like, wow, we have really worked a long time on this dog. I think it had been, it's hard for me to remember, but it had been several months, and we'd been seeing lots of progress, and we were really happy with what she was becoming capable of and how she was fitting into our family. But there were things like her barking. She's a very alert dog. That was quite frustrating, and we knew that the sooner we got a handle on that behavior, the better, because again, the more a dog exhibits a behavior, the more likely it is to become a habit, right? And harder to train out of them. So the barking, along with distractions outside and her leash walking, were really the places where we hadn't made the progress that we were hoping to. Although we had made some progress, we weren't where we were wanting to be. We were nowhere close to our goal. So we knew at that point that we needed to adjust what we were doing, and that's when we had a conversation about where we would go next. So here's my top 5 suggestions on how to adjust your approach in order to get moving toward that goal, whether that goal is to have your dog not bark when someone walks in the door, or have your dog walk nicely on leash, or make sure your dog is 100% going to the bathroom outside where they should be. Number 1 is change your reward. I want you to assess what you're using to mark your dog's wanted behaviors in your training, and see if that's something that's enticing enough for your dog to be making some progress. So with training, you will increase the difficulty of what you're asking of your pet as time goes on, or as they're showing progress. And sometimes you're just going to increase the difficulty to a point where it's like, oh, this is just not as easy of a threshold to cross anymore. So your dog needs more from you in order to make that next step happen. And this can easily be solved by giving them the right treat. So if you've been using kibble up until now, it might be time to increase that reward to something highly enticing, like a liver treat. So freeze-dried liver is a fan favorite among a lot of dogs, and we actually use it in the vet clinic for making sure that dogs are enjoying their exams and getting rewarded for their nail trims and that sort of thing. So we find that freeze-dried liver is almost always a favorite, but there are so many options. So I find that there are some good jerky-like treats that you can really break up into small pieces, which is nice because that's always a bonus, is if your training treat can be broken up into really small bits, but also that moisture in the treat kind of changes things up, and pets tend to respond to that as well. Another thing is trying to think outside the box. If your dog seems to be really picky about treats, I've got my cat Hudson here, then you might even want to look at using spreads like cream cheese or peanut butter or Cheese Whiz. But remember that those things are really high cal and can be high fat, so it's important to use them sparingly. So it might be, that you have an amount on a spoon, and that's going to be the max you use for that training session, and you're only using it at one instance in the training session when they do this or that. So you're not always asking for that same response and giving them the same treat, because again, those things can be a bit hard on their tummies, and we know training requires repetition, so you don't want to overload them. One great suggestion I was told once was that someone used hot dogs. So they would cook up a hot dog in the microwave, chop it up into small bits, and put it in a Ziploc bag with their training treats. That could even be kibble. And they would just close the Ziploc bag, let that sit for, half a day, and then remove the hot dog bits and throw those out. And the smell and flavor of the hot dog infuses those treats, and their dogs find those treats that much more enticing. So even something like that could be a great bump up from what you're currently giving to reward them. So assess whether your treat is really enticing enough anymore for your current stage of training. If you've been using praise as a reward, then consider whether your praise is enough. You might have to step up to using treats now, because just praising them for going to the bathroom outside isn't doing the trick anymore, and they need to have that to really encourage them to keep with that habit. So sometimes people will start with the treats and then they kind of wean off the treats and then they just start using praise. But if your pet has shown that they're going to fall back on old habits, then you need to go right back to where you were last successful, which may have been with your treats. So go back to that stage and start again, and maybe better the treat if you need to. Then another option is also to look at toys. So some dogs would be much more focused when they are being trained with a toy. So they are find that a better source of excitement, and it really just grabs their attention better, or is just a much better reward for what they're doing. So you'll see that often in agility dogs, that they're being given their toy at the end of their agility exercise, and that they just go about absolutely nuts for it. So those dogs have been trained that toy is everything and anything, and you're going to get it the second you go through this exercise. So there are some dogs who really find toys much more enticing. So, take a stab at it, see if you can try a few different toys, and just like the treats, you may have to try a few different things to ensure, that is or isn't the right option for them. But this is a really simple place that people don't necessarily think of when they're having that plateau and their dog's just not making the same progress. It's a really simple change, but it can be easy to overlook. Number 2, break it down. Are you pushing too much too fast? So as you're training your dog and you're trying to increase their good behavior or better their response to you with whatever you're training them, are you jumping too fast to the next thing? Dogs are going to need you to be consistent with the first step of the process for quite some time before you move to the next one. So I'm doing a course right now that is this training masterclass, and it's asking you to do 10 repetitions of that command, and do that for about a week before moving on to the next stage. So at least 2 to 3 times a day, and then after a week of doing that 2 to 3 times a day, 10 times at each of those intervals, then to move on to the next part of the phase. So it really is ingraining that into your dog so that it's really going to be a learned behavior, and they're going to have easy recall on that. So think about that when you're working on something. Maybe I need to go just back to the last part of this, or maybe I'm just skipping phases even. Sometimes it's easy to go, okay, they can sit inside. Well, we'll just do this outside on a walk with another dog nearby and strangers walking around. Well, that's a lot to ask of them. So you need to break it down into, okay, now we're going to sit in this part of the house, but we're going to sit in all these other parts of the house too. And then we're also going to have you sit near the door, and then we're going to have you sit on the other side of the door, and then we're going to have you sit just outside the house, and then we're going to have you sit in the driveway, and then we're going to have you sit right as we start our walk, and then you kind of increase it to further along and further distractions, right? Meanwhile, possibly having to increase your reward based on those distractions that you're adding in. So really think about breaking things down into smaller steps when you're seeing some resistance or a lack of response from your dog, okay? They just might not have grasped what you're trying to teach them because you're advancing too soon, or you're not being consistent enough with that frequency to solidify that knowledge so that you can move on, okay? Number 3 is clicker training. I have always been a fan of clicker training since that was one of the first training modalities we learned in tech school, and it was apparent to me as I worked with a dog in our kennel, and we quickly saw how well they did with the clicker training and how engaged they were, and that really impressed me. So I thought, from that moment on, I just thought, well, this is fantastic. Of course, why doesn't everyone not use a clicker? And you do have to train yourself first to use the clicker before you're using it with your dog. So you do have a bit of an adjustment period when you start to use a clicker, but you quickly get the hang of when to click and how quick to click and to pay attention to doing it at the right time. And really, what you're doing with a clicker is that you're using something, and you're not using a treat right off the hop. You're using the clicker to mark the good behavior that your dog is giving you. So if you're asking your dog to lay down, you may point to the ground, and as the second they start to go toward your finger, you click. That's the first step of that trick, is just teaching them to go toward the ground. They might not even ever lay down at that point, but they're just going toward the ground, and that's what you want. And the next time you're really just kind of trying to ask for that second more of them going toward the ground, and then just a little bit more before you click, so that you're progressing that command just ever so slowly, and quickly enough your dog's like, oh, I get this, yeah, down on the ground, okay, right there. The click expedites their learning process because it gives better feedback to the dogs about what they did right and what you want them to repeat. So it's basically just making sure that they don't get confused about what they did right. So when you're doing traditional treat training or positive reinforcement training with treats, and you're just giving them a treat after they sat, well, it takes a long time between the moment you have them sit and you grab that treat for them to get the reward. And that creates a bit of confusion about what exactly they did to earn that reward. So by clicking the moment that they do the right thing, that's the association that you want, because you basically taught your dog when you start with the clicker that the click is always followed by a treat. And that makes the click a positive thing. So they learn to want the click, and so then they understand that the click is the good thing, and that marks the good thing they did. So it's a bit of an association game, but they've come to understand that the click is ideal, and that's marking the exact thing that they're doing right. And that little bit of time, those few seconds, just make your dog learn so much faster. And I've seen it with dogs, but I've also seen it with cats. It's amazing what clicker training can do. So if you're finding your dog is just not progressing, maybe you should look at using a clicker, because maybe they're just getting a little confused about your cues and your timing, and they're just waiting too long for that treat in order to really understand what that treat is rewarding. So There's so many great tutorials on YouTube about that. But I also have my own clicker training tutorial in the Pawdoption Guide membership experience for my members, so that they can use this with their dogs, because it is really an eye-opening experience if you've never used clicker training before. Number 4, I want you to assess your contributions. So this is looking at your role, the role you play specifically in training your dog, and whether you might not be doing your dog justice by some of your behaviors. So this can be something as simple as maybe your timing, right? Assessing, is my timing very good? Am I maybe just a little too slow on giving the reward to my dog? Or am I excited enough when they listen to me? Or am I too excited? Sometimes being too excitable can be something that a dog is distracted by, or gets them really like jumpy and aroused. So you have to also think about how you're affecting your dog. And I definitely see it all the time that there's some people, when they're doing some leash training with their dogs, that they're just too complacent or too, let's just say, not worth following. They're not providing enough of leadership or assertiveness to their walk that the dog is walking them. And sometimes it can be as simple as just like, putting your shoulders back, standing up straight, handling the leash like you own it, right? A few things like that can sometimes make a huge difference with a dog. Like I've seen it, a meek old lady holding a dog leash versus me, and a dog just instantly responds to me with very little attention applied to the leash. It's just about having that leadership and trying to find, how to be that confident person that your dog wants to follow. Okay, so that's worth looking at, whether you're giving your dog some feedback that's really causing a problem with the training. And another huge thing is consistency. Have you been working on this behavior enough? If you're doing it once every 3 days, that's probably not enough to really make any progress. And that might be all the time you have right now. So if that's the case, then I'd suggest that you maybe take a break and take a moment to kind of reassess what you want to work on with your dog, what's top priority, and literally work on one thing at a time. And let those other things kind of just stay where they may. If you need to use extra tools or different methods for the time being, just to kind of make sure things are okay. So whether that's like, the leash training is something we really need to work on, but I really want to work on greeting strangers. Well, then maybe you have a harness that just helps you get by until you can really focus on the leash training, right? It's better to consolidate your effort if that's all you have time for, and then when you start to see that progress, then you get that motivation to work on the next thing when you're able. So it can also come down to, are you burnt out? Have you been dealing with too many things? And it might be more than just like your rescue dog. It could be the stress of work or family life. And if you're finding that those things are really taking a toll on your patience stores that you need to have when you're training, well, then you really need to take a step back and kind of see how you can come at this with a simpler approach, or see if someone else in the family can take this on to try and make new progress. And lastly, number 5, look at getting a professional trainer or doing an online training class. The pandemic has been pretty great about making dog training more accessible online. And I think a lot of dog trainers realized that they needed to have this ability to teach people virtually. And so now there's so many more resources available. And that's a really great thing. The hard thing can be to decide what to go with, but I always suggest positive reinforcement-based techniques or people who have great credentials behind them. So we're talking about professional trainers. Like, anyone can call themselves a dog trainer, and I'll be forthright with you, I am not a dog trainer. I have a great interest in animal behavior and dog training, and maybe one day I will get some certification, but I'm currently not a dog trainer, and I highly recommend that people seek out professional training as needed. I don't think it's necessary for every person who gets a rescue dog, but it can be a great tool. It can be really hard to find the right trainer, so if you are looking for a specific suggestion, feel free to send me an email. Pawdoptionguide@gmail.com is my email, and I'd be happy to send you a recommendation of someone in your area. But the main thing is you're looking for someone who has a certified professional dog training certification or a behavior consultant. But in terms of the dog training, a certified professional dog trainer that is KSA, or knowledge skills assessed. So they've done the comprehensive exam, but they've also done an objective skills-based assessment with at least 300 hours of dog training experience. And so that's going to be someone who has a lot to offer in terms of dog training. So that's a great place to start with a dog trainer. And know that those online training classes are great too, but again, make sure that those classes are created by someone with some certification behind them, or that is an animal behavior consultant, because those are the people who are going to really have some great advice for you. And this is an area where you're going to finally get some solutions that are probably different from what you have initially chosen to do for your dog's problem behavior. We did get a professional trainer with my dog Rory, and that was a game changer because it did help when we had an outside source come in and assess what we were doing and how we were doing it. And they could even just give us some feedback on some of the things we were faltering on, or some of the things we weren't being consistent on. And it's also nice, especially if there's two people in the household training a dog, to have a consensus from a third party about how to do it, because I know we all think our way is the right way. And so it can be helpful to have someone else be like, no, this is the way I want you to do it. You both just have to follow this way. And then we can make sure we're consistent. So don't hesitate. If you can afford to get a professional trainer or do an online training class where you're getting some professional advice on how to proceed with solutions for your dog's problem behaviors, that is so worth it. Are you currently trying to instill some better leash skills in your dog? Well, let me tell you, it took over a year for me to confidently walk my dog Rory on leash alongside my rescue dog Geller. I learned so much from training Rory and Geller to walk well on leash that I created a free video mini course to create a shortcut for the rest of you that are still struggling. You don't have to be embarrassed or anxious to walk your dog anymore. I cover everything from dog aggression to distractions to puppy mischief. Don't forget collars, leashes, and harnesses too. My Tools, Aids, and Techniques to Walk Your Dog with Confidence mini course is available and is absolutely free on my website, www.pawdoptionguide.com/helpful tools. Grab it today. You won't regret it. So let's recap these ways to surpass that plateau and start seeing some training results and some improvements in your dog's behavior. Number 1, change your reward. Look at what you're giving them to encourage wanted behaviors and see if it's enough, or if you just need to adjust it, just tweak that a little. That is such an easy place to start. Number 2, break it down, Maybe you're just moving too fast and you need to take smaller bites, smaller steps in order to see that progress again. Number 3, clicker training. It's a great modality. It's a great way to train your dog and can be a way to help them learn exponentially faster. So it is easier than it looks and is a really, really cool tool for any pet owner to try. Number 4, assess your contributions. Are you the problem? Is it your consistency, your frequency, your frustration, or lack of excitement, lack of engagement? Are there ways that you're contributing negatively to the training process for your dog? Number 5, professional trainer or online training class is never a bad solution. So if you're not seeing forward progress and you just feel stuck and you know that you want more out of your dog, then just do not hesitate to take it to that next step, because you'll often be given solutions you would have never thought of for your problems. I don't doubt that you'll be thrilled that you did. Well, that's all for today. I hope that this episode had some really great morsels for you to take away, and that you'll tune into the next one with just as much enthusiasm as I tried to deliver this one. If you enjoyed this podcast, please make sure to give it a review on whatever your platform you're listening to it on. I'd really appreciate it too if you just head on over to my Instagram, give me a follow, or even snap a screenshot of you listening to this podcast and share what you liked about this episode. I'm most active on Instagram, but you can also find me on my Facebook page at Pawdoption Guide. Thanks for joining me, and I can't wait to be here with you again next week.